How does that
No,
look?
I'm not saying that. You get some sense that there's a handful of stocks.
Look at that. I mean, you could tie that to the market. Bang. So clearly, 'tis the season, and I see you have a young Ebenezer Scrooge behind you in your computer.
I did. First of all, Hoya Saxon, man, nice to see the blue and gray. You're rocking a proud G-Town, even though these are lean times for our hoops program, man. The dude over my shoulder, I mean, let's put it this way, that's not Rod Stewart. And I know there's a lot of people that actually believe that no one's ever seen Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart in the same place, same time. I mean, like, seriously, don't those guys look exactly alike?
They do. They're very similar. But of course, people saw them together because they were together in the band Faces, the
Yeah,
great song
yeah.
"Stay with Me." I mean, so yes, as much as they look alike, but
Who's
a
the
lot of
drummer for
those
that band?
guys.
Who's that drummer for the band?
Wow, I can't help you there. Help me.
Kenny Jones, who then went on to be the drummer for The Who. And honestly, during a really lean period for The Who, that was face dances and stuff like that. And then The Who were bailed out by Zach Starkey, Ringo Starr's son, who learned under, obviously, Dad and also Keith Moon. And The Who have never looked back. I realize, like the Stones, they're getting up there in age. But anyway, there's your rock and roll story.
No, that's
so
a
Kenny
great.
Jones.
One of those albums that came out. I think the album was "It's Hard" came out, and I remember saying to myself, it was the early '80s, if I'm not mistaken. I'm like, oh my God, how the mighty have fallen in terms of the Who. But in terms of the Rolling Stones, I mean, they've never really looked back at all. I mean, obviously, I think we have Ron Wood up because he joined the band this week in 1960 something, if memory serves. Tim Seymour.
Incredible. And if you think about that, the Stones have had some players around the edges. Chuck Leavell on keys. They've some incredible musicians that have been a part of this story. But if you think about the core and that transition from Brian Jones really to Ron Wood, extraordinary. And no, you're right. And it's incredible. I've told you many times. It's Coke versus Pepsi, McDonald's versus Burger King, Stones versus the Who, where I sit on this one. But I give them their just due. And Ronnie Wood, despite looking exactly like Rod Stewart, if you had to play an instrument, what would it be?
I'd be a drummer like you. I think the drummers are to me the drummers are the athletes of the band. How's that?
I like that. I'm first of all, I'm honored that you chose my craft. The joke I'll now say for the 1,005th time is, what do you call the guy standing next to three musicians?
The drummer.
The drummer. And I sing too. And I can give you my Phil Collins, Don Henley, Levon Helm, guys that sing and hit the skins. But
I'll give you a better one. I'm going to give you a better one. You failed. Not that you've forgotten, but Karen Carpenter. I mean, she was a great drummer, but one of the great vocalists of our lifetime.
Yeah, or Meg White on White Stripes. But Karen Carpenter doesn't get her just due. And you're probably at a similar time when Karen was reaching some of her peak, when Ronnie Wood, really settled into his spot in the Stones in the mid '70s. They haven't looked back. Are they a better band? And so the Stones were the core, and we've seen this with other bands. Were they a better band when Ronnie Wood took over? And to that extent, do you think that formula was part of really what took them to the next level?
Absolutely. And people will say that Brian Jones was an amazing musician, without question. You read about his history, and an absolute artist. And I think he had a falling out with the band, but I think you would agree. And listen, maybe the Rolling Stones would have gone on to do as amazing, if not better things with him. You can't do the counterfactual, but without question, they took the next step when they brought in Ron Wood.
Okay, so this is commercial break, and this is what we do here. Companies that have taken the next step by tinkering with the C-suite, or someone just wasn't working out, or someone was clearly the right person at the right time to take this company to the next level. Who do you want to lead off with?
Well, I think we share this view, and I'm not trying to steal it from you, but I will say, listen,
no.
Founders are really important, and Sergey Brin and Larry Page at Google, obviously they're just geniuses, but the company really took it to the next level when they brought in Ruth Porat. You can look at a stock chart. You can overlay a stock chart with when she got there, and that's when the stock really and the company really went into the next level, went into orbit. And she's the CFO of the company. I think she's been there now for 7 years, 8 years, and to me, that was a critical hire. So for my view, it would be Google, Alphabet, whatever you want to call them.
I think most people know that Apple's been on a tear. It's the biggest company in the world. But what they probably don't realize is that not only Microsoft, but Google actually has been a better performing company. I think Google is up somewhere north of 60% this year, 66% this year, and has been the dominant of the dominant companies. So what has done that? And I agree. I think the difference in Ruth Porat also, again, she comes at this from the CFO's chair, and she comes at this in a place for a company that we've all known how influential Google is, and how we are tied to Google in our lives, and that Google also has this whole black box of other bets, as we call them, that have been undervalued, and at one point even YouTube was another bet until it's been broken out as a revenue item, and clearly I think one of the drivers of the valuation at a time when streaming and content and whatnot. But I think Ruth Porat absolutely brought credibility to those earnings calls, to explaining what the business was, to being accountable and saying, hey, look, Wall Street and the broader investor world are not going to be happy with, just trust us. It's in there somewhere. I think, again, Google, the earnings calls, the balance sheet explanations, the insight into the company, but it's been a corporate governance re-rating that Ruth Porat has brought to. I don't know if Ronnie Wood did that. I don't know if the Stones were better behaved with Ronnie in the dressing room. What do you think?
My sense is the answer is no. It would have been cool to hang out with those guys in the late 60s, early 70s, just to sort of get a feel for what they're up to. But one of another companies that I think is in your wheelhouse, you've talked about now correctly for a while, is what GM has done under Mary Barra.
Another lady into the C-suite that has transformed a company that we all knew before. And Mary Barra, I think, has presided over GM at a time when they were really transitioning. And remember, not really long after this company comes out of bankruptcy in the financial crisis, repositions itself. GM at one point really stood for Global Motors. GM has now decided that it's kind of global vision, but I think it's vision of a company that needs to be profitable, needs to be efficient, and obviously needs to deliver high quality vehicles. In the last 18 months, the story really has evolved into GM's focus on EV, autonomous, Ultium batteries, Lordstown good, Lordstown bad, but GM as an innovator, and that didn't just happen overnight. And I'm absolutely certain that Mary Barra was committed to the evolution of this company from a technology and the trends around EV and whatnot. Kudos to her.
It's interesting. So obviously we're thrilled to be with Reach TV, and we're on all the airports here in the United States. The busiest, I think, or one of the busiest, is O'Hare. I mentioned that because Chicago's sort of the flip side of this. That's a band that is a band in name only. I would say at least 50 different people have come in and out of that C-suite, yet they still remain to this day. And I don't want to put you on the spot in naming one of those companies, but I always find it fascinating that Chicago will tour and they will have no semblance of reality as to what they were 20, 30 years ago.
Well, look, think of companies that were better in the 70s than they were in the 80s, and you can't find many. But think of bands that were better in the 70s than they were in the 80s. And the list is long, Guy Adami. So Chicago's probably at the top of the heap. Peter Cetera wrestling control of that band. This is a tough one. I mean, I think it's a lot easier to point to, hear me out here. So in music, the change in the genre and I think the way music tastes have changed in the 70s. You went from classic rock to kind of acid rock to even more like arena rock. Yeah, we did that. And then you got into the 80s and you had more of a pop thing going on. And some of the best bands had to conform. The question is the band more important than the era? And I think we're seeing that with corporate America. There are companies that are just happen to be really well positioned now. So how about that for me throwing that right back to you?
No question about it.
It ain't easy.
And I'll leave you on this, Tim. If you leave me now, you'll take away the biggest part of me. But unfortunately, we have to leave you folks now. That's Tim Seymour. I'm Guy Adami. We are
Commercial break, baby. What a big surprise. Guy, I'll see you tomorrow.